In October 2015, I was in my horror phase and obsessed with all things spooky and paranormal. Curiously, I ordered a Ouija board from Amazon and waited until a night when our parents weren't home to use it. I persuaded my younger sister to try it with me, and we were at the dining room table with the lights dimmed, both of us holding the plant shed. I asked the board some questions, and we both left because it was kind of awkward and funny. I began to move the piece around, trying to creep out my sister, but she knew it was me doing it. After a few minutes of doing this, my sister went to her room and I went to mine. I searched online for more stories about Ouija boards and kept reading about people's experiences using them. I also looked up why it didn't work for us, so I decided to try again. That night, at around 1 in the morning, when my sister was already asleep, I went back downstairs to the dining room and dimmed the lights. I tried to use the Ouija board again, asking the same questions as before, but this time I didn't get a response. Instead, I heard what sounded like soft footsteps from upstairs, which might have been my sister hearing me down here. Our older brother's room was located above the dining room. Since he was away at college, my sister wouldn't have been in there. I ascended the stairs in silence and heard a louder voice coming from my brother's room. I wondered if my sister was pulling a practical joke on me to frighten me. When I got to the door and pressed my ear against it, I heard the voice of an older woman. My deceased grandmother's voice could be heard repeatedly shouting, "Grandma's here, Georgie!" And at first I didn't know what was being said, since I wasn't sure how my sister could be doing a voice like that. When I opened the door and switched on the light, I felt every hair on my body spring up, but nobody was inside. After the voice stopped, I ran to my room, closed and locked the door, and curled up under the covers. I felt like everything in the room was spinning, and I was too shocked to be thinking rationally. After I calmed down, I said a prayer before trying to sleep, but I was awake the entire night. 8 years later, I can still clearly recall this night. 2 years back, my friend asked if I'd use a Ouija board with him. He was scared to do it alone, thinking there might be some paranormal stuff going on. I thought he was being ridiculous, telling him ghosts weren't real. But he insisted, so I thought, whatever, I'll be a good friend and join in, even though I still thought he was crazy. So that night I crashed at his place, and we messed around with the Ouija board. At first I thought he was messing with me when the planchette moved. I accused him, but he swore he wasn't doing anything. The entity we were talking to seemed cool, claiming to be a friend whenever we asked for its name. I was still skeptical, thinking my friend was playing a prank until the entity spelled out a threat. "If you don't believe in me, I'll make you believe. Watch your friend suffer." I rolled my eyes, thinking it was all nonsense. But then, out of nowhere, my buddy started having what looked like a seizure. Freaked out, I went over to check on him, and it felt like something was stabbing into my leg. I looked down, and my leg was bleeding, even though there was nothing there. My friend suddenly stopped convulsing, stood up, and in this weird trance-like voice said, "Leave or you die." I booked it out of there and ran home. Since then, my life's been a mess. I've been seeing these black human-like figures, and sometimes I even forget my own name. It's like I'm haunted or something. Strange stuff keeps happening to me. I'm not myself anymore, waking up with cuts and bruises that looked like bite marks. Last winter, my sister, her boyfriend, and I decided to do a seance to figure out who was bothering her boyfriend. We gathered all the stuff we needed and did some cleaning rituals before starting. After cleaning and blessing the altar, we kicked off the seance. We started chanting, and everything seemed on track. However, there was this weird vibe in their room that we only noticed later. At first, everything looked normal. Then, out of nowhere, the boyfriend started softly crying, then hyperventilating and freaking out. It seemed like the entity we were trying to contact was attacking him. The boyfriend decided to blow out the candle, and that's when things went off the rails. We were at my sister's place, and suddenly, we heard tapping on the windows and sides of the house. Footsteps and soft whining followed from outside, so we decided to call it quits. Even now, going into her house at night feels like stepping into a dimension of hell. You spot cloaked figures by the pond behind her house, and things seem to come out of the ceiling and floors. When it comes to dealing with unleashed demons, you never seem to have enough power to ward them off. We cleansed the house afterward and turned it into storage. No one goes in there alone because the things you see are like nightmares on steroids. All of this came from a seemingly harmless seance on a winter night, an experience my sister, her boyfriend, and I will probably never forget. When I was 16 years old, I was really excited to try the Ouija board, so I texted few of my friends to come over. I was home alone, and I knew that would make the whole experience much scarier. My friend Liam, who was 17, had a car, so he picked up my friend Jack, and they came right over. It was like 9 p.m., it was dark out obviously, and my parents were gone for a couple nights. My younger brother of 2 years, Adam, was also home, so I asked him to join as well. We were going to play on the floor in the loft, which was converted into my bedroom. We turned off the lights, and then turned on a flashlight, and put it on the floor in the corner of the room, pointed towards the board. All four of us sat on one side of the board and we held the plant shed and started asking questions. None of us had ever done this before, so we asked basic questions. I suggested to move if someone was present. Then the plant shed began to move to the word yes for the first time. Adam asked, "How old are you?" And the plant shed moved from 6 to 77. We looked at each other, and I knew that at least one of them was moving it. We all played along and didn't break immersion. Eventually I asked, "Are you a demon?" And the planchette moved to the word yes. At this point we all laughed and broke immersion knowing that one of us was tinkering around. At that moment the flashlight turned off and we all stopped laughing and became really afraid. "Who did that?" someone asked. But it was obviously none of us. The flashlight was all the way in the corner. I crawled to get it and kept pressing the button. It wouldn't turn back on. I turned on my bedside lamp and I saw the freaked out expressions on my friend's and brother's face. I said that was the most terrifying moment for the battery to die. But also part of me believed it wasn't a coincidence. We stopped playing after that moment and we even left my room and went to the backyard just because we were all freaked out. Being in the house at that moment, I had to sleep in that room that night though. And when my friends left and Adam eventually went to sleep, I knew I had to as well. I put the Ouija board back in the box and brought it downstairs out of my room. I just felt weird, sleeping in the same room as it that night. As soon as I turned off the light, I just tried to go to sleep right away, not sitting on my phone for an hour or whatever, like I usually do, as I was starting to finally drift off into a half-sleep. Something in my closet fell over. I immediately rose up and looked in the direction of the closet door. I flicked on the bedside lamp and walked over to the closet. It was a small walk-in closet where I kept some of my clothes. There's a light switch on the outside of the closet that turned on a single light bulb inside of it. I turned it on and peered down at the crevice at the bottom of the door, where I saw what appeared to be two shadows cast by feet on the opposite side of the door. As soon as I saw this, I screamed, ran to Adam's room, and told him what I had just witnessed. When he arrived, I led him to my room to show him. The light in the closet was still on, but the shadows at the bottom of the door had vanished. When I opened the door, there was nobody inside the closet, but there was something on the floor, a wooden box I had made during my arts and crafts projects, into which I would store childhood mementos. I opened the door, but there was nothing there, and the contents spilled onto the floor. That night, I slept in my parents' bed. The next night, I slept in the spare bedroom. After a week, I ultimately started sleeping in my own bed again, but I will never forget that night. I haven't touched a Ouija board since. I was in my mid-20s and I was never interested in trying the Ouija board. But one day my friend George invited me to go with him and Mandy, a girl that he met recently, to this supposedly haunted abandoned house, which was about a half-hour drive away. He convinced me that Mandy's friend would be cute, so I said, why not? Since I had nothing planned that evening, I thought it would be a good idea to do this late at night. George picked me up first, around 11 p.m., and then we drove to pick up the girls from this park. I had already met Mandy, but not her friend Carly, who had red hair and nose ring. Mandy had previously visited this property and had said that it was high in activity, a word I had never heard before but could clearly understand. Since I don't really believe in the paranormal, I thought it entertaining, so I smiled a little when she said it. During the drive, Mandy brought a large bag with her. I asked her what was inside, and she pulled out a Ouija board box and a candle. George said, "Oh, that's the surprise." Apparently, Mandy was surprised that we would be using a Ouija board in an abandoned house. To be honest, I didn't find that particularly exciting, but I was there for the adventure. Mandy directed George where to park. When we got close, it was this really dark street with no streetlights, with an open field on one side and trees on the other. The house driveway was gated off, so we had to walk from there. We walked through some woods that led us to the backyard of the house from there. Mandy led us to the back window that she climbed through last time. It was a bit high up, so we had to help the girls up, and we just climbed in ourselves and we walked around the house for a bit. All the furniture was still inside, but it was just decrepit. It hadn't been lived in for probably decades. I don't scare easily. And I must admit, being in there at night was very eerie. It would probably be terrifying alone. It was dead silent. Besides our footsteps on the creaky floors, there were some old portraits of people hung on the wall. They looked like they were taken in the 50s, which made me wonder how old this house was, and what was the story behind it. Most likely the couple living there died and there was no family left to claim the house. Mandy put the board on the ground and lighted the 2 candles. It was obvious that she was really interested in this and started asking a lot of spiritual questions. For the first few questions, the planchette piece remained still as she asked, "Is anyone there? Can anyone hear?" Eventually it began to spell, "Hello?" I turned to face George, who had already left, but the girls were serious and even told me to stop laughing out of respect. I stopped smiling and put on a serious expression. Next, she asked, "What's your name?" And the planchette moved slowly around the board to spell out the name Gregory. After that, she asked him, "How long have you been dead?" And it moved around to spell out 30 years. For a little while, I didn't think that Mandy or Carly were really doing this. We continued to play along until there was a loud bang coming from the upstairs of the home. At that point, we all sprang and released the planchette. Danny urged that it may be Gregory when George asked whether there was someone out there. Mandy and Carly returned their hands to the plant shed and asked Gregory, "Did you make that sound?" George and I interrupted her, saying, "We need to leave if someone's upstairs." At this point, we were convinced that the girls were playing a practical joke on us and that someone was trying to scare us upstairs. We also heard footsteps above us, music. There was no doubting that these sounds were footsteps. George and I agreed to go upstairs and check it out, expecting to find someone trying to prank us. The girls kept saying no, come back down. We went up the extremely creaky steps and entered the first open door. We found it was a bedroom. The furniture and everything in the room was extremely decayed, and then there was this door right in the corner of the room, most likely a closet. It was cracked open and we whispered to each other that we thought we heard something in the closet. I put my finger up to my lips to tell him to be quiet, and we listened when we heard a clear exhale behind the door. We both quickly left the room. We hurried downstairs expecting to find the girls still in the living room, but they were gone. The candles, the Ouija board, everything. There was just darkness in the house now. We didn't even hear them sneak out. We left through the window again in a hurry and ran to the car. George tried calling Mandy's phone multiple times, but it went straight to voicemail every time. Maybe she blocked him. They were nowhere to be found either. We went straight to the car and drove home. George never heard from that girl again. He only hung out with her 2 times. He didn't know where she lived or anything. We did form our own crazy theory that they were in fact trying to trap us somehow, and the footsteps upstairs were from somebody they knew. It's also possible they never left the house and that they were hiding somewhere inside. Another possible theory that maybe something bad happened to them while we were upstairs. We might never know what really happened that night.